Hello, everyone. I'm Rebecca Weber. You're watching Better for America, presented by AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens. Now, joining me today is Roger Severino. He is the Vice President of Domestic Policy at the Heritage Foundation. Mr. Severino holds a JD from Harvard Law School, and he also served in the Health and Human Services Department under President Trump. Now, this is a man who has achieved so much greatness. He achieved regulatory savings of $3.6 billion in healthcare industry costs over 5 years. He identified and proposed an additional $3.2 billion in cost savings from the repeal of ineffective and unnecessary regulatory burdens. And with respects to civil rights, Severino protected older persons and people with disabilities from being denied life-saving care due to discriminatory quality of life judgments. And this was especially important during the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Severino has been profiled in the New York Times, The Atlantic, The Wall Street Journal, The Hill. He has appeared on Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, among many others. We're just thrilled to have you with us, sir. Roger Severino, thank you so much for joining me on AMAC's Better for America.
Glad to be on.
Now, sir, you were a trial attorney for 7 years at the U.S. Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division, and it's obvious to our members, over 2 million strong, that the Trump indictments are really coordinated and politically motivated, and they continue to be at the center of attention as we lead up to the November presidential election. We just saw the January 6th trial that was originally scheduled for March 4th, a day before Super Tuesday, removed from the docket. And we watched Fani Willis down in Georgia admit to her relationship with the prosecutor she appointed in this Georgia case. I think that could complicate that trial potentially. So obviously nothing is ever set in stone as new developments are leading to unexpected changes. I want to ask you, sir, weighing all of this, which of these indictments do you think could pose a potential threat to President Trump in the lead up to the presidential election?
Well, one thing is clear. This is all political lawfare. This is unprecedented in the history of our country, where the legal system has been weaponized to go after political enemies. A former president, very likely the candidate for one major party of the country, and currently leading in the polls as being the likely next president of the United States. And this is an attempt to prevent the will of the people from being heard. You had these cases trying to get Trump off the ballots in certain states. Talk about election interference. If there's any sort of election interference, it's preventing a candidate from running and preventing the American people from voting for him. And what they want to do, opponents of President Trump, is prevent him from running. And this is something you normally see only in third world countries, banana republics, where you see these juntas come together and exclude people from running. That's not America. But we've seen this with Fani Willis, in Georgia, in Florida, in D.C., in New York, in Colorado. All these cases that are on the thinnest of legal premises, only put in place for one reason, to try to prevent Trump from running and winning.
That's exactly right. Now, what are your expectations in terms of how it might play out, or your perspective? In other words, our members are asking, should we or will we expect to see most of these trials occur before the election, or do you think that there will be some legal maneuvering to delay them? And is that better if they're delayed?
Yeah, it's a bit up in the air. What they want to do is prevent him from actually getting into office. So they've been trying to push it just so it gets a maximum damage right before the election, hoping that it would somehow change the results. What has happened is that Trump has only gotten more popular the more these indictments come down, because it exposes how it's just a political power play. And the American people are rejecting it. They're seeing it for what it is. It's an abuse of the rule of law. And when you have Fani Willis coming up with these trumped-up charges, and now you have these extraordinary conflicts of interest in her particular case, that case should already have been dismissed. But we already see that this is politics on steroids. The rule of law means if there's an actual violation of law, you have an impartial prosecutor with an impartial judge with an impartial jury. Here, they're cherry picking. They're trying to find just the right jury and just the right jurisdiction with the most far left-wing prosecutor you could find with Fani Willis, and that's what you see going on. The other cases we see, it's more the same. Now, they have different legal weights and merits, but it all comes down to one simple thing. They want to prevent Trump physically by trying to put him in jail from being the next president of the United States.
You know, and speaking of rule of law, this to me is really glaring. We have a sitting president who seems to ignore rule of law, and we see what's happening at the southern border, the northern border. We see that this is something that's impacting everyday Americans and their lives. Cities are less safe today than they were. We had a very secure border under Donald J. Trump. Today, our members are saying this must be intentional. In other words, I'm hearing numbers that they're saying maybe over 10 million illegals have crossed our country. Many of these people, the majority it seems, are young single males. And we see that children, young people are dying of fentanyl overdose. I'm concerned about child trafficking. I want you to speak to rule of law and how our nation has shifted away from rule of law, maybe some examples, and what that means for our future society.
Well, you mentioned the border, which is a prime example. It is lawless at the border. We're being flooded with fentanyl. Folks from countries, parts unknown, including some of our adversaries, are coming in completely unvetted. It is an open door. And thankfully, it looks like the terrible border deal that Congress was cooking up is now killed. It's now dead and likely buried. Because it would have been open the door to our borders wide and saying, well, if we reach over 5,000 a day, then maybe you could close the border and leave it to the discretion of the Biden administration. Why isn't the border closed now? President Trump was able to use existing authorities to actually significantly stop the flow of illegal immigrants by closing the border. Come through the ports of entry. You could do that now. Use the authorities you have now to get that done. So this border deal, thankfully, has crashed and burned, but it does highlight the fact that this Biden administration is not enforcing the law. When you have the flood of illegal immigrants coming through, and much to the credit of Governor Abbott in Texas, actually busing them to these sanctuary cities. If these liberal blue cities want to take in everybody and come free and clear, open door, welcome mat, we'll even kick out our own school kids to make room for you. That's what they're doing in New York. That's what they're doing in Chicago. That's what they're doing in Los Angeles, San Francisco. And now they're saying enough is enough. Even in these liberal cities saying, wow, we're actually being held to our own standards. This is very expensive. Crime is skyrocketing. This is bad for America. And I think the American people have had enough with this administration's lawlessness on the border.
They sure have. They sure have. Now, you worked in the Trump administration. In terms of structure, how do you think maybe a second Trump term could differ from the first? In other words, do you expect to see maybe some of the same people returning to their positions, or do you think that there would be, he's going to be, if Trump is successful and does become the next president, he's going to be faced with some major challenges. What does that look like to you?
Well, we've been through it, and what the left said Trump would do that would have been terrible did not come to pass. We had peace, we had prosperity, we had the Abraham Accords, we had record employment, especially for African Americans, we had a booming economy, we had a border under control, and all of that disappeared under Biden. And we learned a lot of lessons in the first few years in Trump that time is the most precious commodity. And we're trying to work, especially at the Heritage Foundation, we have a project called Project 2025, where we have laid out the plans for what can and should be done in the next conservative administration to try to front load as much of that effort as possible. Because it took us really 2 years in the first Trump administration to get major regulations done, to undo lift the shackles off of the American economy, and that's when you started to see the booms. We don't have any time to waste. We have so much to undo of terrible policies. We have so many good policies that Trump had to restore. And then we have additional policies that will restore American greatness. And these things take time. So Project 2025 is working on, and this already has the book, Mandate for Leadership, out. It's online, available for people to read. What the plan is, agency by agency, what policies should be put in place. We're working on getting a LinkedIn for the conservative movement to vet the potential political appointees, get people from all walks of life to come to serve in Washington, to take our country back. And we're training folks as well. All of these things are being done up front. And this investment, we're very hopeful, will pay off. And the next conservative president will have a turnkey operation and ready to go.
Yeah, I love to hear the great work that you folks are doing and really taking action. We need that more than ever today. Something I found just so refreshing was when Kevin Roberts, the president of the Heritage Foundation, he was at the World Economic Forum. And I loved when he said, I want to get candid. He said, elites are telling us that public safety isn't a problem. He said, elites are telling all of us, the world, that climate change, is a major problem. And then he goes on to say, but the solutions cost more average lives. In other words, the solutions that they're proposing are going to have an incredible impact on lives. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, he was mentioning climate change as the favorite topic of the global elites who want to, quote, save the climate on the backs of the poor, right? So this climate alarmism is, the end goal is to limit the number of cars, limit the number of power plants, make gas extraordinarily expensive, make energy extraordinarily expensive, to try to bring us back, to regress to some sort of more primitive society that doesn't consume energy. But energy is the way to prosperity. And their plans would be enacted on the backs of the poor, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, especially in East Asia. These countries need energy to come out of poverty, to actually achieve human flourishing in an economic sense, and they're going to be deprived if these globalists have their way. They're the ones who trot around to these conferences in Davos on their private jets. While at the same time they're saying, well, no, you cannot have internal combustion engines, you can't have gas-powered stoves, you are going to be cold in the winter because we don't want you to have that energy in abundance, and people will die because of that. More people die from cold than from heat, and we need actual energy for human health and human prosperity. But again, these globalists, they're fine. They're never going to be put at risk. Their children will always be okay. They'll have access to all the benefits of high society. But they want the poor, who are now heating their homes with dung and sticks, to continue to do so because they're going to deny them access to actually cleaner and safer, cheaper energy like natural gas and petroleum products.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's these elites, they do certainly live in a bubble. They don't understand the challenges that average everyday Americans face. People who are living paycheck to paycheck, who can't afford the electric car, for example, even if they wanted to go electric, what do you do, and can't afford to replace their water heater. All of this has an incredible impact, especially on the most vulnerable people and the poorest of poor. So thank you for elaborating there. Now, sir, you saw the 2016 and 2020 elections up close, and President Trump has repeatedly said that there is more spirit today than there has ever been, in both in 2016 and 2020. Based on what you're seeing, do you agree with Trump's assessment? And what are you expecting to come in November?
Well, it looks like Trump is ahead in the polls, and for good reason. The Biden economy has never recovered from the inflation. He was burning money by handing it out willy-nilly. And when you print more money than there is goods, you're going to get rampant inflation. And what you've seen is the prices haven't gone down. The inflation isn't as horrendous as it was. But people remember, gas, groceries, and rent is more expensive than ever before, right? Until those prices come down, as opposed to, well, it's not as rip-roaring inflationary as it was last year. Well, guess what? People are still paying those same prices and more than last year and the year before. Prices aren't going down, so people still feel that pinch. They hurt and are struggling. And this is a common complaint that people are working hard. They get up in the morning, work all day, come back, and they can't even buy groceries. And after they pay the rent, they can't go out to the movies anymore. And families with kids are struggling. If what are they going to do because they are living paycheck to paycheck? Retired folks are seeing that they're on fixed incomes. what's going to happen if this inflation continues, right? It means they're not going to be able to make ends meet. And those fears are real. And people compare that to what happened under the Trump years. And I think we see that the Biden administration policies themselves are the ones that have led to economic harm to so many millions of American peoples. And people are wondering, wow, do we really need to continue this? Isn't there a better way? And the better ways are better policies.
Very well said. Mr. Severino, we love the work that you're doing over at Heritage, Heritage 25. Tell our listeners Project 25. Tell our listeners how they can get involved and participate, get more information.
Go to project2025.org, and you'll be able to get all the resources, sign up, enter into our database if you think that you may be called to serve in a future conservative administration. Read the book and find out what is going on, because it is so important that we get the policies right, that the next conservative president hit the ground running, and day one we reverse all the terrible liberal policies that have held our country back, and we start restoring America to its position of greatness in the world.
Excellent. Well, thank you again. And we so appreciate your being here. You know, it reminds me the work that you do of the great quote by Edmund Burke, who said, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." You're a good man. You're doing so much. I want to thank you and the Heritage for all the great work you do, and love to have you join us back again in the future.
Thank you.
Hello, AMAC members. Get ready for your next adventure with exclusive access to TripWise, the travel protection plan brought to you by our partner, Trip Insurance Consultants. Protect your travel investment with features like cancel for any reason, medical evacuation, and more, all at an exclusive, affordable rate. Trip Insurance Consultants offers personal customer service to guide you through selecting the right coverage. Join countless AMAC members who trust TripWise for peace of mind. Visit tripinsuranceconsultants.com/AMAC to unlock exclusive access. Travel confidently with Trip Insurance Consultants, your AMAC partner in travel protection.